What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Life Beyond Boxes podcast. My name is Marian. I got Victor here with both of us with Premium Q. And this is the first time that we have two guests actually at one time. So we got Brian Leonard and Jason Highland. How's it going, guys?
What's going on?
Welcome, both of you guys.
Welcome to the show. So,
Thanks for having us.
100%. So the podcast is, it's called Life Beyond Boxes for a reason. And that reason is we are in the moving and storage industry. However, somebody's life doesn't stop with the move or before that, right? So that's why we're looking at having multiple guests in different type of industries. So let's dive into, and of course, we'll try to keep it related to what it pertains to the move itself. However, we can go a lot deeper or broader. So, Ryan, you're a family law attorney located in Watertown, Mass., right? And I see in here you've been practicing family law for about 17 years?
That's correct. Located here, live here as well. And I've been I do other areas of law, but primarily family law for the last 15, 17 years.
Nice. And what got you into this field?
So two things, I think, life experiences. One is I was myself a child of divorce. My parents divorced when I was about 6, 7 years old. So growing up in that realm, it was my brother and I, and the time it was like the early to mid 80s, and sort of a novel concept at that time where my parents had split custody. So a true 50-50 split with both of them. Whereas, prior to that and around that time, it was still the mother or the wife getting primary custody of the kids. And so, I was one of the few that I knew that was being shuffled back and forth. Luckily, my parents had a fairly decent relationship at that point to make it as easy as possible, but there were still some challenges there. So that was one. And the other was my father was actually a family law attorney in Pennsylvania where I grew up. So I was sort of around that and exposed to that, again, from a young age, both as a child of divorce and then, as a kid being dragged to my father's office at times when he either didn't want to pay for a babysitter or just wanted to torture us kids.
Gotcha. And then what brought you to Boston?
So I went to law school up at UNH, University of New Hampshire, graduated in 2005, and then took a job outside of family law, actually, in like a small business doing compliance and small business advising. And then I moved down to Massachusetts around that time. The job was in Salem, New Hampshire. I moved down because I had a friend from law school that was living down here. And, having no exposure to Massachusetts, but knowing that I didn't want to move back to Pennsylvania, I ended up taking the bar in Massachusetts, passing, and meeting my wife as well, who was from Mass originally and lived in Watertown. I grew up there as well, so that's what brought me to Mass and what made me stay.
Love it. And Jason, I see you've been a realtor since 2006, and mostly working with buyer and sellers. I'm assuming mostly residential. And then you're also co-founder and principal of O'Connell and Highland. Is that the same company, or is it like the brokerage? That's what it is?
Yeah, so O'Connell and Highland is a real estate team. There are 7 of us on the team, 5 of which are agents. So we're active in the field, and we've got a few administrative that support the team. And then we are under the brokerage platform or banner Keller Williams. Keller Williams is the largest real estate company. They're all individually franchised, but the largest player in the world. So we operate the team on the Keller Williams platform.
Love it. And I'm assuming most of your clients are just a typical family that's looking for their dream home and not necessarily an investor that's looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a wide mix of agents, sort of both demographically and geographically experienced. So we do kind of cover the spectrum from first-time buyer to trophy home. And then over the years, we've developed relationships with folks that started investing in real estate, but it's primarily a residential flavor.
Love it. So I guess let's get us started with both of you, and feel free, any of you, to begin with. What do you consider one of the craziest stories that you've had with a client?
I mean, Ryan, you got the greatest one of all time, so I'm not even going to try.
All right. Well, I mean, I have the story on numerous occasions, but it never fails to get at least a laugh or a chuckle out of somebody. So I had this really contentious divorce probably 6 or 7 years ago, affluent couple, and they just couldn't get along. They couldn't agree on the color of the sky. So one of my favorite stories involves the sale of the marital home, actually. Touching Jason's world and eventually your world and had to move. But the wife was living at the house, and the husband was had moved out and was renting a place. But the wife had some medical challenges, making it difficult for her to be around. So she was unable to, mow the lawn, keep the house. And the realtor had come in, and they were planning on doing an open house. This was a Friday. And by the Saturday was the open house, and came by, and the was unmowed and unkempt, and it was like, we got to do something. We can't have an open house with the place looking like this. So, obviously, knowing the wife's medical challenges, there was no way that she could do it. So the realtor calls the husband and says, "Hey, you got to come over and mow the lawn." And at this point, we had been in litigation for about 2 years, and the parties were just again sick of each other, couldn't stand each other beforehand, and 2 years and thousands of dollars on each side. He was just fed up. So he came over reluctantly and mowed the lawn. The wife was inside the house at the time, heard the lawnmower go, and then it stopped. And she looked out the window, and he had mowed FUCKU into the lawn, left the mower, and left. And she's looking at it like, well, what do I do? So she calls the police. She calls me. Again, he owns the house, so it's not like there's anything the police could do. And I said, I'll contact the attorney. But ultimately, my advice is contact the realtor, because she's the one sort of brokering this and has to figure out what to do. And so ultimately, she called him back and said, you obviously can't leave it like that. But the point was made. Again, he was fed up, and rightfully so, at that stage. And that was my divorce story, which just shows the pettiness and the retribution that goes along with people that really dislike each other by the end of that process.
That's when you need one of those people with like the the satellite kind of hovercrafts that takes the photos.
The
drones, bird.
I need to know.
Exactly.
Was this one of your customers?
No, it was a client. I was representing. I don't want to say who I was representing there, but it was a client of mine, and I fielded the call. And ultimately, it was, again, it not a surprise at that stage of the litigation, at that stage of the case, but it was still, and it's one thing for me to say it, but it's also, I have it memorialized in a police report as well, with the came out and saw the message written into the lawn, mowed into the lawn, and then, obviously whatever happened from there. So again, did nothing illegal. I mean, it was a tremendous way to get back at somebody that he didn't like, but again, unhelpful in a divorce setting, because it just makes it more contentious. And then, the back and forth, the tit for tat that goes along with it, just, it doesn't really help anybody but lawyers at that point, because it increases the fees.
Yeah. Now, Jason, have you, I'm sure you have a lot of experience being on, obviously the seller's agent on divorce cases. Is there any additional challenges other than potentially the husband coming in and the F word in the lawn when it comes to being the selling agent to people that are selling their, lifetime home, or what they thought it was anyways?
Oh yeah. It might be the most challenging sale, Victor. The way I look at it is that, and Ryan can speak to this in great detail, but you've got this idea of marital property, and it's going to be devised in an equitable way. So you have to represent now these two disparate people, but you've got shared interests. So you have to completely neutralize yourself. Think Switzerland, and you have to be as unbiased and objective as possible. You certainly can't show sympathy to one side or the other side. You run into situations where maybe you've got rapport with one side over the other. There's more perceived trust. So you'll get one-way communication, but you got to be very, very with that. They're very delicate situations. Ryan nailed it. At this point, logic has gone out the window, and you're talking about money, and it's emotional, and there's hurt there. So while it's great, obviously, to get these opportunities, and oftentimes as being the listing agent, there's a real necessity to move, to sell. So I guess in some ways you get cooperation there. You really are trying to get two people to come back to the sandbox and just sort of get through this. I mean, it's kind of hard to sell in regular terms just because folks have different expectations for price. And then anytime you've got this expectation that's set, you're sort of like bound to be disappointed by it. Then you layer on top of it all of the pain of the divorce. They're really, really sales. I mean, I've got one that I'm working on right now that we thought was going to go to market months ago. And it turns out that there's just these various tactics and sort of like delays. And, one of the partners is leveraging this to sort of negotiate further. And it's just difficult, right? Because we were ready to go. I mean, I had professional photography taken and we had a plan and we had a price, and you thought it was going to be on the market months ago. And here we are, just sort of like it's a staring contest, seeing who can get the better deal. So they're really tricky sales, really tricky.
And that
and to follow up and piggyback, sorry to interrupt you, Victor, to piggyback on Jason's point, a lot of times, you have part of the negotiation in the divorce, whether it's through a final agreement, which is called the separation agreement here in Massachusetts, or through a temporary order, because, again, you have to figure out at some point the divorce can take anywhere from 3-4 months to over 2 years in some cases, based on various factors. So if the parties are in agreement to sell, or even if they're not in agreement to sell, sometimes they try and buy each other out or attempt to leverage their finances and stay in the house for whatever reason. But usually you would have to agree on, not only the realtor, but also the list price and, offers to accept. And you have to remember too, a lot of people, the majority of their wealth and their income comes from the house. So it's a big time sale. It's not something like, hey, who's going to pay the cable bill, or, who's going to be responsible for the child's instrument payments. This is, equity they're getting, who's paying for the house while the divorce goes through, but also how is the income going to be split. And in certain instances, I've been to separation agreements naming the actual realtor. It's, so they you don't know anybody. And, they neither one of them want to agree on the other person's realtor. So then it goes to the attorneys to sort of recommend somebody that has no connection to either one of them. Or sometimes they are in agreement, and it's a fairly simple process to say, okay, we're going to name, say in this case, for example, Jason Highland in the agreement. And then it's already there. They're already obligated through a court order that, if they don't cooperate, then there are penalties associated with that. But it can be fairly simplistic, and they're both working towards the same goal. But it is one of the most, one of the bigger decisions in a divorce is not only selling the house, but what happens to the income. And the income from the house, sometimes while litigation continues, sometimes they agree to split it up, 50-50 right from the start. Sometimes, they can't agree on that. And, once both sides are making a claim for more equity in the house, and that still needs to be determined either by further agreement of the parties or through a court order or a trial at some point. So at that point, the sale happens and the money has to sit in an escrow account until there's a judgment. And, I can give a bunch of examples of real estate because almost every divorce has real estate associated with it. But I did a trial last May, and the parties had no kids. It was a short-term marriage, and they just couldn't agree on the acquisition of the house. And we went to a trial, and now here we are. April 1st is next week, and I still don't have a decision. And we're talking almost over about 10 months after the trial. The money is still sitting in an escrow account and, is waiting for the judge to release her decision. And, there's no telling when that decision is going to be released. Some judges are fairly quick and bang it out within a couple of weeks or months. And others, like in this case, we're going on over 10 months now. And that money is, both parties need it and are counting on it, but there's nothing that can be done until we know from the judgment that division is going to be split, whether 50-50 or whether it's some other percentage based on what the judge decides.
Hey, Ryan, was there reason claim in your estimation for not being 50-50 in that scenario?
Yeah, in this case, and again, there's statutory could go into every divorce to split up assets, but in this case, it was because it was a very short-term marriage. They had been living together and had bought a house together prior to the marriage, but the marriage only lasted about 4 or 5 months where they were living together in the house again that they bought previously. So in that case, usually in a short-term situation, the judges will most likely try and make the parties whole to the extent possible. And In this case, there was disagreement over, who paid what down payment, and then how the mortgage and the principal was being paid during the time of the marriage, and who put what down, and who, one party made more than the other party. So is it, is the party made less getting an equal amount of equity in the house from after the down payment? So all that goes into trying to figure out what it is. And, at that point, it just becomes a math equation. And, the husband's math was different than the wife's math, and they couldn't bridge the gap, and therefore had to go to a trial. Again, a trial over, you say 4.5-month marriage with no kids. It's like, well, what are we doing here? It's going to cost you more money to litigate this. And they probably spent, more than they would have if they gave in to half, because I think at the end of the day, we were about $40,000 or $45,000 apart on, what the wife wanted from the equity of the house versus what the husband was willing to offer. And, probably at the end of the day, they each spent $20,000 to $30,000 in the lead up to a trial, and then including the trial, which is which is atypical in a family law case. Most cases settle well in advance, but in this case, the trial is expensive. And I told my client at the time, like, hey, we are now 2 weeks away. As soon as I start, if we can't settle this, as soon as I start, that's money that you're going to accrue regardless of this case could settle tomorrow, or can settle on the courthouse steps, so to speak. And, that's time and that's money that you're going to have to spend regardless of this case we get in front of a judge. So, it does get really expensive really fast. And at the end of the day, it probably was not a case worth trying. And I told my client that, but again, with divorce, it's, rationality goes out the window, and people just want to be right and want to get back at the other party. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality and what keeps me in business, frankly.
In a scenario like this, do you replace the real estate attorney, or you have to work hand in hand with
So the real estate attorney would do the transaction once for an on the house. So I don't deal with that. I mean, but I am, if the divorce litigation is still ongoing, I am dealing with the other attorney and or my client in that case to effectuate the sale. So sometimes it's like the parties don't speak, or maybe sometimes there's a restraining order and they can't speak for whatever reason. Then, you have to sort of be the middleman to communicate offers and to communicate like, oh, so-and-so has to get into the house, or needs to, again, mow the lawn, or, make sure that it's staged, or get a cleaning person in there or something like that. So again, if the parties aren't talking, it goes to lawyers. And then, I don't think Jason would be doing his job. And again, because of the sensitive area, without communicating, or at least CCing the lawyers on both sides in any communications to the clients, just so everybody's on the same page. It's not, it's easy for things to get lost in translation and people to fight over things during this process. So it's very important to keep the communication up and make sure everybody knows what's happening at all times.
And Jason, have you ever ran into a scenario where, say the, wife and the ex-wife and ex-husband have different opinions on obviously how they want to sell. They both have a real estate agent in mind of who they want to have the listing. And have you ever gone in on it with another real estate agent to kind of be the buffer and settle that between the two divorce parties? Or is it just kind of, it's one real estate agent and they kind of have to duke it out on who they go with?
Yeah, I mean, co-listing is what that's called. It's rare, if like zero chance of happening here. I'd have to check. I think even our MLS board prohibits it. So it's not something you would typically see. You can, however, work out like a referral agreement with the other realtor. Certainly it's an interesting case, right? Where it's like this fight is happening and then each side is building up their team. And it's like they're going to trust their team. And Ryan referenced this a minute ago. So it's like sometimes I go into these things and you helped them buy the house. So you've had experience and there's recognition and trust there between both sides. Obviously, it's still delicate, but like at least both parties. Other times you come in sort of it's already happened and it's like you've got no relationship with the other side, but you owe them the same duties, right? Like, and that's where the communication gets really interesting, because you'll get singular direct points of communication and you have to almost back it out and then like reply all so that everybody gets. But yeah, Victor, I think to answer your question, I would encourage them to interview both, because again, you need a high level of trust here. So they should both agree on the most competent agent, and then typically the agents amongst themselves, instead of trying to split the baby or Sophie's choice, they could just work out a referral fee so that there's a voice on that side.
Yeah, and jumping in, I think that's where, if you are in the middle of a divorce, that's where going to court and getting a court order is necessary. You can't, both parties are referring or not or recommending one agent list the property versus the other, and they can't agree. Then, you have the arbiter to come in and say, okay, this is going to be one or the other, or we're just going to have to pick some new agent that neither one of you know, and it's just going to come in and do that. And that person referred from one of the lawyers, or maybe a different person in one of the offices or something. But there either needs to be an agreement, or a judge has to say, okay, it's going to be this person. And normally it would be, okay, we're just going to. They're not going to do a hearing on who the agent is, because at that point there's a ton of them out there, and the judges don't necessarily know or want to waste time over selecting an agent. So at that point, it's going to be, if the parties can't agree. If the parties can agree, we'll write it into an agreement, either a temporary order or in a judgment. And if they can't agree, then the attorneys are going to have to get involved and select somebody there. And they're just going to, that has knowledge or no interaction with the parties whatsoever. And, it's just going to be, okay, this person from this office is recommended. And in my experience, that's where the lawyers kind of say, okay, I don't know. Like if I'm recommending somebody, I would put Jason forth. And then if the other person had somebody else, and then it's just like, okay, now maybe at that point they would have to get their qualifications, and maybe they would present to the lawyers. It's ever that far. Usually at that point, it's just like, okay, Jason, if you don't know either the parties, are you familiar with this area, or is somebody else maybe has more familiarity with a certain location, that we just go with that person just to, again, end that issue and move on to probably a ton of other issues in that same divorce.
Yeah, and that's where it's so interesting in terms of like, what's the motivation behind it? And then ultimately, where do you think the resolution is? Because in not all situations, right, Ride, to maybe one of the parties stays in the house. Maybe there's young children that are staying there. So you sort of have this idea of like the fair valuation. But that isn't always necessarily like the highest price, because you could have somebody that would actually not the highest potential valuation, because they're trying to work out a buyout of the other side. So it's interesting, right? Like you don't have clear indication as to what the motives are of the person. So I mean, you're dancing a little bit here.
Yeah, and sometimes the sale is the last resort, because there's obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but there are three potential scenarios in it where a house is owned in a divorce. It's either one side buys out the other, or there's a sale. And ultimately, it depends on the finances of the parties, whether either one of them can afford to do that, and then what the circumstances are. Are the kids there? Are the kids in school? Have they been established in this house for a long period of time? And if both parties can afford to do it, a judge usually would say, okay, we're not going to necessarily award one or the other. I mean, they may have a hearing on it if it's important. If there's family, a long-term family property or something like that needs to stay in the house, that may be a consideration as well. But for the most part, if the parties can't agree, a judge is probably just going to say, okay, this property needs to sell. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to go on the market right now. They may award a separate hearing, or a separate request may be, okay, husband or wife, or whoever, one of the parties stays in the house, primarily is responsible for the mortgage, responsible for the bills, and then the house sells, at X date in the future. Sometimes, their parties have kids in high school, and they just want them to finish out school, and moving and replacing, the house would disrupt that and cause them to have to potentially move out of a district that they've been in for years and years. So again, there's a number of factors that go into this. And that's where, again, if the parties can't agree, then court intervention is necessary. And that's where, I would come in, or any divorce attorney would come in to argue that point in front of a judge if the parties can't agree. But at the end of the day, there's only so much a judge can do in terms of forcing the parties to agree. And they're not going to, waste time having hearings and trying to figure out who deserves the house at that point. Again, unless there's really unique circumstances.
You're saying there that just they're pushing it to the sale. It's the most efficient way to solve it.
Most likely. And again, that hardly ever happens in my experience, that both parties are able to afford the house or want the house. And at that point it becomes, okay, if only one party wants it, the judge will give that party an opportunity to buy the other out, but within a reasonable time. It's not going to say, okay, you have 4 years to do this. It's, if you can do this within the next 90 days, the next 6 months, or close within the next 6 months, then we'll give you the option. But if it doesn't, then, the house is going to be listed on or around this certain date. unless there's extensions granted. So, and again, that's where you were talking about appraisals come in, and then the parties are getting different valuations on the house, because obviously the person getting bought out wants the maximum value, and the person buying the house wants to depress the value as much as possible. So, there's a lot that goes into it through the divorce, and it touches a lot of different areas of the home market. Inspectors and appraisers and real estate agents and mortgage lenders, movers. It really does run the gamut at that point, and it does get complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think even of sort of this concept of cooperation. Because the party that's invested that does not want to move, right, doesn't want to get out of there. And I think an interesting analogy would be, if I'm trying to sell a home that a renter is currently in, and the renter is not to be dismoved or dislodged, right? Like they're upset they're going to get booted out. So here you are then trying to sort of show the house with the renter in it. The willingness to cooperate is a big deal, right? Like, does the house look good? Do they say yes to the showings? Can we schedule the open house? So you certainly, now that you're adding, I think you used the word petty ride before, it's like you get this emotional hurt and pettiness in it. One party doesn't want to leave and they're kind of being forced to leave. Are they going to cooperate, right? Is the house going to show well or photograph well? Am I going to get access to the house when I need access to the house? It was a lot.
And Marion, you and Victor probably encounter that a lot too, when you either have to move one of the parties out who's, either by court order or by agreement has to move, or the house is, sold and the party that doesn't really want to leave gets emotional or is having to pack up and having to deal with you guys to schedule that. And it becomes either problematic because, both of them are there arguing, or it's just really emotional for the person who's leaving that doesn't really want to leave.
We had a couple of scenarios where I remember at least two that we had an officer so the guy, we had trucks, so the team was bringing stuff for party number one, and the other team was bringing stuff in the truck for the husband, and so that was one of the
more stickier ones than that we've encountered. I think the good thing is by the time they get to move, a lot of the resentment is kind of flushed out. They've been through all the legal stuff and they went through all the headaches, and I think at some point, I'm sure Ryan you can attest that at some point it's just like it's a tug of war, no side is winning, so somebody has to kind of give a little bit. So by the time they get to the actual move, I feel like a lot of that is kind of out. But we've had a couple interesting stories. I remember one off the top of my head, and it was kind of sad because Jason, like you were saying, a lot of times these are people that you've worked with and you were working when they were a couple to get into their house. So, we had a returning customer of ours. I mean, I think we moved them from, apartment to apartment. When they were younger, they bought, their forever house or what they thought would be the forever house. And then they call a couple years later to get a divorce. And it was husband calling me first and saying, unfortunately, we're getting a divorce. This is my date. This is where you're going to move stuff out. We always ask, do you guys want to do it in separate days? Do you want to do it the same day? I mean, there's, obviously, like Marion said, there's ways we can work around it. But he goes, no, we're just doing everything separately. And I go, okay, no problem. Like, she can call me whenever she's ready. She called me about a day later. She was a little more upset. So she goes, she says, hey, listen, we're getting a divorce. I go, yeah, I know, so-and-so, your husband called and told me that. And then she goes, oh, did he also tell you that I caught him with a hooker? And I go, no, he left that one out.
No way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of crazy stuff that happens.
Yeah. So not as much as I'm sure Ryan and even you do, Jason.
Well, hopefully hopefully you can pack up and move the penicillin then.
Yeah.
Now, what I was going to say in that scenario is, you're right, Victor, in the sense that the time of the divorce, it's probably sort of a fait accompli. They've gone through the process, and it's just, all right, now we have to get out. Now it's like, the final sale, we have to move, and all contentiousness is in the past, in the sense that the case is either over or about to be over. But it's I would have, if it's a separation and somebody agreed to move out, and if the one or both parties is upset about it, or if there's potentially kids around, which they shouldn't be, but you never know when emotions get involved here. I can imagine that being difficult for you guys to navigate as well. But speaking to that too is, there's situations where neither party has trust in the other. So they have to sort of supervise or want to supervise what the other party's taking because, again, the possession is 9/10 is the old adage for a reason. When it comes down to the separation agreement, personal property is not something that really gets litigated too much. Again, unless there's really big time valuables such as artwork or family heirlooms or things like that. But, if somebody goes and takes, the majority of the furniture, it's very difficult to get that back to the other person. I mean, you would like, okay, we're getting divorced. We'll just split the furniture, split the stuff 50-50. And that's, there's always allegations that so-and-so took more or just cleaned the house out. What happens? And I can say a personal story about that. My father ended up getting remarried. And then when I was like 15 years old, came home from school one day and the house was completely cleared out because they were going through a separation and she brought the movers in while he was at work and got everything she wanted. And it was just like, I remember I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, what happened to all the stuff? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, nothing is here. The dining room's cleaned out, all this stuff. They left, some furniture in the kids' rooms, but that was it. And, he was like, yeah, I'm going to have to call you back. And, ultimately it was done, sort of that midnight move where, she waited, backed the truck in as soon as he left for work, cleared everything out. Nobody was the wiser. And then, he spent the next couple of years going through that process, so it does happen. It's unfortunate when it does, but, there's a lot of mistrust and a lot of resentment in these things that people look to get back at the other, in any way they can. And, doing it, there's nothing illegal about that because who's to say who owns what or who deserves what. And even if somebody did that, okay, say there's $30,000 worth of furniture that they took, that still would be accounted for in this separation. And, would be, if you're at it equitably, would say, okay, then, wife in this case, for example, would owe the husband $15,000 of that $30,000 that was taken. So that has to be accounted for in some way. But that also means that, the husband in this scenario would be missing certain items that he was counting on taking. And, are you really going to spend the money to fight over beds and dressers and things like that? That gets expensive and tedious and, ultimately is not something that judges are really willing to sit and listen to because sometimes there's 20 or 30 cases on the docket in a day. And they can't just get to every issue and everything at all times.
And typically we have the officer, like when we get there, typically like when it's a scenario like this, we have an officer that will kind of point out things so we wouldn't, unless we will be called, like you said, like somebody calls and says, I have to clear this house out. We wouldn't know that that's a scenario where it's a divorce involved.
Yeah.
But let's you obviously have a lot of experience in this field. I guess in a simple way, in the most simplified version of this, let's give people that are listening or watching this episode a little bit of a blueprint of how to make this as pain-free as possible. Of course, there are factors, and again, disclaimer, like we're not giving legal advice like right here on this episode, but what would be some tips we can give people to make this process as simple and as pain-free as we can?
Right, you want to go first because once they've reached an agreement, my process is pretty normalized. I think the biggest mistake that realtors make is that they get a call from one or the other side and they kind of jump in, and not that it's too early, but like you sort of start the plan in motion and you don't have an agreement for what Ryan was saying about the division of assets. So I think getting to that either contested or uncontested agreement is probably the first step here, right?
Yeah, I would say. I think communication. So to the extent that there's two ways of getting a divorce in Massachusetts, either contested or uncontested. And so the uncontested way is where the parties agree on everything prior to filing, and then you just go through the process with the separation agreement, the court forms, and you go before a judge. And that's where the parties can agree. It has to be on all issues. So custody of the kids, division of assets, what's going on with the house, anything involving the divorce has to be agreed to prior to filing. Whereas a contested divorce is there's no agreement on anything, or there's partial agreement, but there's certain issues that can't be resolved, and then you have to file a contested divorce. And that's the traditional, I'm getting you served, and we're going to court for hearings, and eventually on the track for trial unless the case settles. So I would say, depending on an individual's circumstances, if there is civility and they can discuss certain things, then I would communication is the first, is just sit down and have a conversation, or a telephone call, to go over, the issues of the divorce. If there are kids, obviously you want to talk about what you want versus what the other partner wants. But in regards to moving and a house, where the do we each want to try and buy the house? Or, is that something that you know without having to talk to the other person, or is it something where I can't afford it, nor do I want to stay here. Sometimes there's too many memories, and it's just like I don't want to live in a house where we were married and happy, and now we're not, and all the ghosts of the past are sort of all around me at all times. So if you know from the start that the house is going to be sold, or say one party is going to explore buying out the other party, then that makes the process a lot easier. And again, that starts with communication. And even if you can't agree on that, at least when you retain an attorney, which I would always recommend in any divorce process, is to let your attorney know from the start, like, hey, this is something that we both want to try and buy the other one out, or we're both in agreement to sell. And maybe just because it's a divorce and you're arguing over some issues doesn't mean all issues have to be contested, right? So maybe they're fighting over kids, but the house is something that can be agreed in terms of when to sell it, who you're using, what the list price is, all that stuff. So that may be something that you can communicate to your attorney, and then either if both sides are represented, either I would reach out to their attorney or vice versa and say, okay, we need to do temporary orders for custody of the kids and visitation and child support, but we also need to figure out what's going on with the house. Are both parties still going to be living there during the separation? Is one party moving out and the other party going to stay there? And if so, who's paying the mortgage and the bills and things like that? And, or, you can also include in that temporary order the status of the house. The house should be listed with Jason Highland. It's going to be put on the market by May 1st. And the list price is going to be this, and the parties shall communicate at all times with the realtor, certain steps for each party to take, and that makes the process easier. And then by the time it gets to Jason, you can just send him a copy of the temp order and say, okay, here's your name, list, what they're agreeing. And obviously the list price doesn't have to be in there. It's just something that, they would agree on that in consultation with the realtor. That's usually how it would be written up. But, you do have the ability to direct that, and the judge would not interfere if the parties are in agreement with how that goes. And where it gets contentious is if they can't agree on the buyout price, or, they just don't want the other person to have it for whatever reason. And that happens, that pettiness frequently. It's like, okay, I don't care if we sell it, but I don't want her to buy me out, or I don't want him to buy me out. That becomes where, okay, well, that's not enough reason to stop the other side from attempting to do so, even if you don't want to do that.
Hey, right. In an uncontested situation, is it still more common than not that both sides would have their own representation?
For attorneys you're speaking of?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's recommended that you do, because, say the other option, like a mediator. And, a mediator is an attorney. A mediator is not representing either side, but giving advice on what the law is, and can kind of help them, reach an agreement on certain issues in consultation with what the statutes are, what the law says, and what the customs are, and then write up that agreement for the parties to file and, go to court themselves. At the same time, that attorney has a goal in mind, which is, let's get an agreement. We want this done. And it doesn't necessarily mean that agreement is going to be equitable for both sides. The party may agree to it, but not know that they could potentially push this in a way that may win, or bring it to a judge, and the judge may rule in their favor for something. And again, you're relying on one person. So I would say, at the very least, even if they want to try and save money, and it's the most amicable of all time, they just agree that they don't want to be together. They're in full agreement if they have any kids and all assets and things like that. They can try and save money and say, okay, and I've had this situation before where one of the parties would come to me and say, okay, can you help me with this? And I'll let them know, okay, I'm representing you. I can amicable to the other side. And, the custom would be, okay, I'll write based on what you tell me, and then I'll send it to the other side, and I'll communicate. They have to fill out the financial statement. They have to sign these forms. They have to sign off on what's written there. And if they want any changes or edits to the agreement for what I draft, or if it's not what you guys talked about, then we can make those changes. But at the end of the day, it's got to be very clear to both sides that I'm only representing one party in that scenario. I'm not a mediator, even though I'm sort of acting as a quasi-mediator at that point, because I am the between both parties, and trying to accomplish their their mutual goals, which is an uncontested divorce. But that's the differentiation is, I can only represent one side, and even if I'm very congenial and amicable to the other side, it doesn't mean that I'm giving them legal advice where their interests are officially protected. I would always say, in any divorce, in any situation, in any scenario, it's worthwhile to retain an attorney, even if it is just, hey, my spouse's attorney drafted this separation agreement, and I just need to put together a financial statement and I have somebody review it. It shouldn't take more than a few hours, and at that point, that attorney can say, okay, here are some or things that I flagged that may not be equitable, but again, it doesn't have to be equitable to be agreed upon, right? Like somebody can say, hey, listen, there's equity in this house, but I'm going to waive it because this house was a gift from my spouse's parents, and it's been in that family for 100 years. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to be, so cold-hearted that I'm going to take it and potentially have them lose this house, or take equity from the house that I didn't earn or wasn't it's something that I use my own money for. You know what I mean? So that those situations get tricky on the other end, but in this case, it would be okay. The judge is looking at this saying this is not an equitable split. You're not getting 50% of the assets. But there's certain circumstances here to say, okay, I'm not going to, and that's acceptable because of X, Y, and Z.
You think it's good form or bad form? Sometimes I get called in, I feel like, pretty early into this. And again, I'd mentioned to Victor, there's relationships there, and there's a high level of trust. And some families with 3, 4, 5 times. I mean, like we've had a relationship over 10, 12, 15 years. So in a scenario where, let's say I was invited over early and it's like, hey, we want to talk to you. We're going to go ahead and separate here. We really haven't taken any meaningful action. We just know we want to do this. Am I in a good place to recommend that they each get counsel there? Or would you not touch that on my end?
No, I would say on your end, you would probably not want to recommend one person because, again, even if you say, hey, I got this great attorney, Ryan Leonard, you should talk to him. I can only represent one or the other, and you don't want a position if you're going to get the listing to put the other in any situation. But I think you're safe to say, I think it's just general, it's good knowledge going forward to say you should both retain counsel. I've done this enough. I've been in this scenario. It might not be contentious now, but it might get contentious, or just, it's smart planning to have somebody else just look out for your interest. That has your paying interest in mind. And not the other parties, because where there's alignment, there could be alignment 99% of the things, and you're in a full agreement. There may be one thing that favors the other, and it's not the way it's written is not fair to you in the long run. And you don't. I would say it's just practice and a smart business decision to have your own lawyer looking out for your interests in any divorce, no matter how contentious or uncontentious it would be.
Does the divorce need to be finalized for the sale to go through, or can the sale happen first?
No, they can. That's what I was referring to before. You can do it through temporary order if the case is ongoing for other things, and neither party wants to stay in the house, or neither party can afford to stay in the house, which is probably more common with the dual income custom for most married people at this point. So, I can't afford this house on my own, nor do I want it. So we have to make arrangements to sell it because I don't want to be responsible for the mortgage at this point, nor do we want to go into foreclosure or bankruptcy or, have this house affect financially more than a divorce already would. So in that scenario, you can definitely do it by a temporary order, which, again, once by agreement or by an order of the court on a temporary basis. But obviously there's not a temporary order to sell a house. It ends up being a permanent order once the house sells.
And Ryan, Jason, how much real estate advice comes into play with some of these? So say it's applicable, they both want to sell, and they obviously one is moving out, but they eventually want to sell, and you come in as the listing agent. Is there something where, hey guys, I know you want to sell it as fast as possible, but it probably makes sense to wait a little bit, put it on the market on X date, because it might sell better or quicker or whatever, it might be? Where does the real estate advice come in that? And does it differ any bit when it's a divorce?
Yeah, very interesting question. I mean, there's definite seasonality in New England to the market. So like in a vacuum, you would see sort of the most robust time of the market being from right around now, late March, early April, kind of running through the 4th of July. You've got the weather's at play there. You've got the school cycle. You've got our rental cycle. I mean, it all kind of pushes it into motion for the next 6 months. So certainly, like if I get a call from Ryan and he's like, I've got this situation and I need to sell the house, and it's like 2 days before the holidays or Christmas, certainly I think you would take some of that into account, because there's periods of the year that are just quieter over others. Another interesting one, and it would complicate matters even further, just in terms of cooperation. Sometimes like the house isn't ready to be put on the market. I mean, it could need cosmetic improvements, or there could be things that that if you invested in ROI wise would come back and fetch you a higher price. What's interesting though is that, it's like the timeline of the individuals is also really, really heavily weighted here. While yes, on paper, there are times of year where it makes more sense to sell a house. That being said, you can't sell a house unless it's on the market. So I tend to sort of lean on the fact that like, hey, if this has to be done and you've got this deadline, let's take it on the market, not just wait to try to time it. Because you just don't know. There could be something freakish happens out there and there's a big spike in interest rates, and then all of a sudden buyer demand goes out the window, and it's like, these folks reached an agreement with expectations on settling at a number, and you can no longer achieve it. So generally speaking, we would try to get it on the market when it's ready to be put on.
I like that.
Yeah, and then to piggyback on that, I think there's other factors in a divorce scenario where it would prevent it. As Jason said, one of them being, hey, we got to do some repairs. We know this if we invest in this, it will sell for $150,000 more. But there's other scenarios where, okay, we're getting divorced. It needs to be, we've already contacted the realtor. We're already in good shape on agreeing to sell, but hey, it's March and I want to get through the school year, or, I need to find another place to live. And it's like, there's other outside factors that can be worked into any agreement to do that. And, again, if it's a reasonable amount of time, I just did a divorce where they were going to say, all right, wife stays in the house for 2 more years while the daughter is in college. And then once she graduates, sell the house, and then the parties will split up the assets. So you can do something like that. Or, similarly, I have a case now where the party's daughter's in high school, and, the husband's agreeing that the wife and the daughter can stay in the house until she graduates and, sell the house then, or she's going to look to, they each have a buyout option at that point. So again, you can get creative that way either based on agreement or factors. And even if the judge decides, okay, this house needs to be sold, they may take into account the fact that, we're in March and the school year ends in June, and there's no obligation to list it as of, say April 1st, which is next week, just to hit, a certain arbitrary date. They're going to look at it and say, okay, we don't want disruption for the kids, so we'll put it on the market at a certain date, or just say, hey, it's, even if it's put on the market in May, we can't have it until after school is over, whatever that is. So that's something that Jason would be, at that stage to say, okay, we don't care. We know it's going to be sold. It doesn't matter, but we want the kids to stay in the same school for the remainder of the school year. So, whatever it is, if we put it on April 1st, it doesn't really matter to me because the house is getting sold. We just know that it's going to be a longer close date. We're not going to be able to close within 45 days or 60 days. We're going to have to close in 90 days or 120 days to accommodate that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, there's other external factors there. Less this year, but more last year. Last year we had kind of a rapid rise in interest rates and borrowing costs. So the scenario of Ryan was talking about there is super interesting, or at least triggers in my mind, because, for most buyers, when they're getting a primary mortgage, this would be the buyer of the house that the divorcing couple is selling. You typically say, hey, I'm going to owner occupy this for 60 days. So when you don't do that, you really can't lock in your interest rate as a buyer. So the second you got an offer accepted, you can call the lender and say, hey, lock in the rate, and they'll do it for 45 or so days. If you then you've got this 4, 5, 6 month long closing, right? For whatever reason, people are desiring that. Like last year, the buyer then is floating their interest rate, which it then could have jumped from 6.5 to 8 in that period, which actually then could have killed the ability for the buyer to buy the house. So there's a bunch of other things we would factor as we go through. And this is where, to Brian's point, just good communication, as much transparency as possible, just level-headed decision-making, I think, is key.
Yeah, and I remember in that regard, and this kind of goes beyond my realm as a family law divorce attorney, but the situation where I had referred Jason a client, not a divorce client, but just a friend of mine who sold the house, but they were simultaneously buying the house and theirs was delayed, so they were able to, I believe, stay in the house and pay the new owners basically rent for a certain amount of time in order to effectuate the closing at a certain, they closed on a date. They were able to stay so they could stay in the house until their house was ready. It wasn't, they're homeless for 2 months while the other house is closing or being renovated or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's called a rent back, and you see it a lot with people with young children or kids in school. And you've got even just sort of thinking, wife, like she would not move mid-school year. I'm like it would be this Herculean effort. So there'd be a huge desirability to do that in June or July.
And I think that's where the synergy with a realtor comes into from in my world is like that's something that I would not really touch. When to list it, how to list it, if there is any kind of rent back or any kind of special clause there, that's something that can be worked out, with the realtor, with the closing attorney, the real estate attorney at that point. To handle. And that's not anything that I would need to really get involved with. I may need to be aware of it. So if it becomes a problem, then I can handle it in court. But that's not anything that would really come into negotiations at that point, unless there was some really specific, circumstance that the court needed to be aware of, because if anybody violated it, then he would want that judge's signature in the back to be able to enforce it through a contempt.
And I would just over communicate that scenario. It's one where you just make sure everybody's on the same page. They get it. Again, to Ryan's point, that's not terribly relevant information for what he's trying to work out in the separation agreement. But it's like, guys, just to reiterate, here's where we are. Here's where the next steps are. Here's where we're taking this. Here's why we're taking this. And you just keep pushing it forward. And
there's so many valuable tips, I guess, and on all these steps that you guys mentioned. And as we get closer to wrapping things up, what, I guess this question applies to both of you. What would be one question that you wish a customer would have asked you that would have made the process simpler and easier for them?
You could take this one first. I'm going to need to think on that for a sec, Jay.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's valuation adjacent here. I mean, I would try to invert that, right? And ultimately try to find out from either of the two parties, like, how they make decisions, one, and then secondarily, what type of information is valuable to them. I mean, sometimes, folks come in and it's like, see how good my research is. And it's this encyclopedia thick, right? You've spent hours on the damn thing, right? And it's just a lot of information. And again, sometimes like these scenarios, there's just so much emotion charging and flowing through it. That I don't want to say it's wasted effort, because I think people, they would appreciate like the thoroughness of it. So I guess to answer your question, my question to them would simply just be, guys, how do we get to a place where you feel comfortable with the valuation? What information can I provide that will make you both feel like this is a true representation for the market value of this house?
And I think my answer to that question isn't a specific question that a client can ask me. It's more of circumstances, because in divorces, things get emotional and contentious, and people think that they can just do things unilaterally. Like, hey, it's my retirement plan, so I'm going to cash out and pay for X, Y, and Z. And it's like they do these things without talking to me as their attorney. And then it's like, okay, wait, because a lot of people, even though it's the start of the process and it's on the summons that you get if you file a divorce, there's an automatic financial restraining order that goes into place as soon as it's filed, when the summons issued, which means you can't, take money out of bank accounts, even if it's a joint account. You can't just wipe it out. Like, you can make regular spends, pay the mortgage, pay for the groceries, things like that. But you can't take, okay, I'm going to take 10 grand out and go on a around the world cruise. You can't change beneficiaries of life insurance. You can't, withdraw funds from a 401k and hide assets, or, I'm going to take, the second home that I have and, take so-and-so off the deed, or add so-and-so to the deed, or something. Like, all these financial scenarios, just you need either agreement from the other side or court approval, and to get that asset. And a lot of people will be like, well, we're separated. We've been separated. If they do it private to divorce, the court doesn't have jurisdiction. It doesn't mean that they can't say, all right, I removed my spouse from my health insurance policy because, F her, and I'm not going to pay for that anymore. If done after a complaint for divorce has been filed, that's a contemptible issue, and the spouse removed can go to court and the other spouse to add them back, and have remedies as like attorney fees. So those are the scenarios where I wish people would consult me first. And yes, it's incumbent upon the lawyer to communicate that, but some people just think it's my asset. They don't really understand exactly, like, just because it's in your name doesn't mean that it's not a marital asset. And just because you own the house prior to the marriage, but you lived there for 15 years and that was the marital home, doesn't mean the other spouse doesn't have some sort of fund interest. So then, being able to say, all right, I'm going to do a cash refi and, take that money and do such and such with. Okay. I mean, that's a marital asset. You may get this from some or all of that, or have to account for that $20,000 that you took out as part of the settlement on the back end to say, all right, you got to use your 401k to cover this, or just pay $20,000 in cash back, or whatever it would be. So those are the things that I wish people would, it doesn't happen that frequently. And usually, again, a good attorney will say that right off the bat, either in the initial consultation or right after being hired, that you can't do this. You can't just automatically assume that just the asset is in your name, that it belongs to you, and you can do whatever you want.
No, this is I feel like
now sorry, I was going to put that question back to you guys, since we can refer this back to moving, since it's your podcast. Like, what are the things where people come to you in a divorce process that you wish that they would ask?
Yeah, I think for us, I think the main question that we find the most difficulty, because it just kind of makes the process a little bit longer when they're moving, is whether they want to move together or if they want to move separate. So a bunch of different ways for us to do a divorce move. Obviously, it's coming from the same point of origin.
Together to meet in the same day.
Yeah. So kind of load it all and make, if it's applicable, they both, know that they're going off in separate places, and they're fine with the other person knowing where they're going to live. So that's kind of a big thing for us. A lot of times, one of the other parties doesn't want the other one to know where they're moving to. So we always ask them, okay, it's a, 4-bedroom house. You guys are getting a divorce. It's going to 2 different places. Do you want to do it together? And do both parties want to get one quote where we just obviously load everything separately and then make 2 stops? Or do you guys want to completely do it separate? Obviously, a lot of benefits for a couple to do it together. Obviously, they save on it. It's all done in one day. So especially with closings, you can kind of get out before, obviously, the date that you need to. But obviously, doing it separately might make it a little bit easier if they, aren't on the best of terms. So that's typically what we ask kind of in the beginning, just how or what process they really want to start at when it comes to moving.
I guess the only thing that I would add in there would be communication part, as both of you kind of confirmed, is just making sure that it's all, when we get there, it's all clear for the guys of in terms of if it's done in separate days, this is what we have to take today, and this is what we should never touch.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That type of thing. So I guess it all comes down to.
So as a follow-up there, the option would be for a divorcing couple, it's either we can have one truck, load all the stuff on there, load it on maybe separately, depending on which stop we're making first. And then, obviously you save on the move, the cost of the move, because it's just one crew with one stop making 2 stops, versus we don't want, so one of the parties doesn't want the other to know where they're living. So we have to do 2 separate trucks, 2 separate moves, 2 separate crews, and, sort of keep it separate. Obviously at that point, you're, more manpower, more, truck space, and it would be probably double the cost or thereabouts.
Yeah, somewhere around there. It's just the length of the process, obviously 2 days where it could be done in one. And then obviously we always like when customers tell us, what they want us to do as far as, giving, or not giving as much information to the spouse. If they be, a lot of times we're moving one party out, the other party is there. And that's when we've been asked, in the past to not write the delivery address on our paperwork, just to kind of keep it, let the guys know, obviously in the emails that they get, but not put anything on the paperwork just in case, because, we have ran into scenarios where, the other party might go in the truck to try to look at, the address. So really, like you said, communication, just, telling us what we can do to make, the process, as stress-free as possible. I mean, moving, as everyone knows, is as stressful as possible. You add the second most stressful thing, other than divorce and moving to it, it just, amplifies everything. So really whatever we can do as easy as possible for everyone.
And also in the case when they don't have a place to go, because, that could be also another thing if a court order is in place and they have to get the stuff out of the house. The situation where we'll put the stuff in storage while they look, or maybe they live with, a family member or friends until they find a new place and whatnot. So the stuff can stay in storage without a problem as well. So that's another, I guess, aspect of it. But yeah, I feel this could probably be part 2 at some point, because it's there's still things in there that people might have questions. But if people want to reach out to you, either of you, where they can find you, and of course we'll list all the information in the show notes of this episode. But go ahead, list like what website, phone number, email, whatever, social media, or any other communication method that you'd like to be contacted at.
Yeah, the best way to contact me is ryanleonardlaw@gmail.com. That's, obviously secure, and, allows me to reach out to the client, potential client directly, to schedule to talk, and, to do the formal initial consultation to, review, aspects of the divorce, explain the process, and, let them know, what comes next.
Awesome. And you can find our contact information on o'connorandhighland.com. That would be the easiest and most efficient way. So o'connorandhighland.com.
Hi guys, this was actually fun. It was packed with a lot of info that a lot of our listeners and people who watch on YouTube will get a lot of value out of it. But anything you want to leave the audience with? Any
send-offs,
end of the episode type of thing?
Yeah, just go ahead, Jay.
I'll just say, I think my brand of brokerage is and will always be collaborating with really like high quality, high competent people. I mean, I've got this great relationship and partnership with Ryan in this capacity, but it's just, I think it's really important to have help, collaboration, and multiple points of view. Come at this sort of like with a Socratic method of just like trying to understand all of the angles, all the dimensions to it. I think that is the way to then establish and build trust, and then really to see what is a highly charged, highly complicated thing, come to it in the kindest way possible, with an outcome that best represents the interests of both sides. So I love partnering with good people, and that's why I'm glad I got Ryan in my corner on this one.
Yeah, and I echo Jay's sentiments too. I trust him implicitly. I've made a number of referrals to him over the years, and he's always crushed it. So I've never had a complaint. I've always got great reviews. So anybody that needs a realtor would be very well served calling Jay and the O'Connor and Highland team. My advice, the parting advice, is, again, something I already said on this podcast, is don't try and do a divorce yourself. The probate court is littered with people that are pro se or just representing themselves in a divorce, and it's a mistake. Not only does it come up the works, and you're waiting there for people to argue things that are irrelevant, but they just don't know what the rights are and what they have to lose, or arguing things that just have no chance of winning. So I would consult an attorney, even if that attorney, definitely shop around. You don't have to go with the first person that you call. Shop around for pricing, shop around for fit, because it is a very important decision in your life and a very emotional process, and you want to make sure that you're teaming with somebody that you can work with, that you trust, and that has your best interest in mind, is going to work for you, within the limits of the law. No attorney is going to take a case to something that is either impermissible or illegal, or take a position that is just contrary to what the process says. So my advice would just be call and retain an attorney, and there's many options for people even if they don't think that they can afford an attorney right off the bat.
Well, anything you want to add?
Nope. Appreciate you guys coming on. Great insights for all of our clients and everything like that. And we'll definitely have a part 2. If anybody listening has any kind of short questions, anything they wanted to touch base maybe on a part 2 about this episode, just leave it below. And like always, we appreciate everyone listening.
Yep, and people will actually be able to have an actual question recorded. First link in the description below. You guys. As always, you'll be able to submit the question right there and record it right on the device. But we'll most likely have a part 2 at some point in time in a few weeks or months. But again, thanks a lot, guys, for making the time today. This was fun. And I guess we'll catch you on the next one.
Love it.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
See y'all later.
Take it easy, guys.